Current Indian government at least is not willing to talk to Pakistan.
Yeah.
That's a clear policy, which is a break from the past where terrorism went on. You had incidents of terrorism, violence, killings, and yet India kept talking to Pakistan. There are several versions of radical Islamism which has been rearing its head everywhere, but including India. But one of the things that distinguishes India and sort of shows India in a different light is the fact, which one should not forget, that we'll have to wait and watch. It's too early to comment on India alliance. To my mind, it is like a fight for survival.
Right.
For many of these political parties who are part of India. Let's accept this fact that we are weaker than China. We are weaker militarily, economically, even internationally. But
Hello guys, welcome to the show. Today we have with us Nitin Gokhale Sir. Sir, it's a huge honor for me to have you on the show. I'm truly humble, sir. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Jay. If one can help upcoming, promising journalists, podcasters, I would certainly go out of my way to be on your program. So, welcome to our studio. And welcome to Delhi to do this specifically with
yes,
me.
Not to mention this is Nitin Gokhale's studio, not mine. Yes, sir. So, sir, let's just cut straight to the chase. So, do you think the government should reenact POTA as a way to prevent terrorism? What are your views on it?
Well, I think POTA is not to be reenacted because you have UAPA.
Okay.
Which is equally, I would say, stringent, equally effective. So you don't need to reenact that. Remember, always any government, any legitimate government, any government which is based on values, which is based on legitimacy after being elected in India, in a democracy, no government would want to overuse or misuse any stringent act. These kind of acts like POTA or UAPA, or earlier there used to be TADA, all of these acts are designed to act against the country's, the nation's enemies, saboteurs, and external as well as internal adversaries.
Yes, sir.
So therefore, there's nothing wrong in having those acts or these laws, but the POTA is another, or UAPA is another version of POTA. So really,
Yes,
POTA per se is not required, but these laws, I have a view that nations always have these stringent provisions to be used when required.
And so regarding this, so what do you think is the current state of affairs of the state of J&K? Do you think peace can be established in Kashmir? What's your whole take on this situation?
See, Kashmir is a complex issue, as you must be aware.
Yes,
You're living there in Jammu and Kashmir. And it's not been an easy state to either govern or easy state to live in for so many years. It has got several dimensions to it. So let me not give you a straight answer about whether peace can prevail. Yes, peace must prevail. And there are different degrees of peace. And it depends on who's looking at what criteria, how do you measure peace?
Yes, sir.
Depends on that. So certainly peace can be brought in. Peace has been brought in. If you compare it to the
1990s
bad days of the 1990s or even 2000s, then peace has certainly made a comeback to Jammu and Kashmir, what it used to be in the 70s and the 80s kind of a thing. But remember, there is always the possibility of Pakistan upping its ante, Pakistan becoming desperate to create chaos and violence and uncertainty in Jammu and Kashmir. So it is never far away. As we see, violence has abated. Civilians are being targeted less than they were before the state became the union territory. But security forces are still targets. Pakistan hasn't given up its proxy war on Jammu and Kashmir. So it's a it's fallacy. It would be a fallacy to say that peace has completely returned. But I must say a relative degree of peace is back in Jammu and Kashmir. And that is very evident in the state when you go around, when you look at different parameters. the number of tourists who go there. And remember, absence of violence is not peace.
Yeah.
There are several other factors which go into measuring peace. It's a complex situation. So I think we should give it time. It's been 5 years now, 4 years from 2019 onwards, when Article 370 was
Yeah.
sort of brought down or abrogated. But let's give it another 5 years and see what happens.
Sir, any current criticisms for the current government, central government, I mean to say,
Well,
in regards to it?
No. So that step was bold. That step was certainly needed for a long time.
That was good.
But as a follow-up, certain actions in the state of Jammu and Kashmir are needed. One is, of course, like I said, absence of violence is not peace. You need more employment opportunities for the local youth. You need to also cut out the discrimination between how people in Jammu are treated and how people in Kashmir Valley are treated.
Yes, sir.
That needs to be corrected. But as I said, there are several aspects to it, and it is a work in progress. I would also like to see more employment opportunities, not in the old manufacturing sector or old professions or old sectors, but in new sectors like more tourism related issues, hospitality, maybe even softer skills for people or youth to take up. And I need central government to actually go and encourage more big business houses to invest in Jammu and Kashmir. So there are, again, as I said, it's nothing can happen overnight.
Yes,
and therefore, there's not much criticism, but I would certainly like the pace of development and pace of political process, finally, to be a little faster. We need to have people's voices in Jammu and Kashmir, not just an administrator or an administration ruled by the governor. That should be something that they should work towards. I think that is something that I must state upfront.
I see. So just the other day ago, I was having interview with Shil Pandit, sir.
Mm-hmm.
He is vocal. He is very vocal about Kashmir issues.
Right.
So, sir, I had asked him question regarding POK.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "हमारा खुद का अपना कश्मीर नहीं संभल रहा, हम POK क्या acquire करें?" So, sir, what's your take on the situation?
I don't have that take, but I
Yeah.
certainly agree with him that we need not hurry into getting POK into India's fold.
Okay.
First of all, like we need to get our act right in India's Jammu and Kashmir. And POK, in any case, as far as India is concerned, is part of India. We have had a resolution in the parliament, and
Yes,
we have not given up the claim on Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But at this moment, India need not invite an additional headache, if I
Okay.
can put it that way. When you have several challenges to meet, several hurdles to overcome, I think that time will come.
Okay.
And I think the other day, I don't remember who said that, automatically Jammu and Kashmir will get the remaining part of POK or
Yes, sir.
POJK back into its fold. There will be a natural integration going forward.
Okay, sir. So, sir, in terms of it, how do you think India should deal with Pakistan in terms of terrorism, counter-terrorism as well? You know, there is some, let's just say, collateral damages as well. Just if in case India launches any strikes, let's just say, if India in the future tries to acquire POK, what do you think, sir? Right now, how should the government deal? Sternly.
Yeah, government's policy, if you see in the past 7-8 years, has been not to talk to Pakistan because unless they give up terrorism, the Indian government is not going to. This current Indian government, at least, is not willing to talk to Pakistan.
Yeah.
That's a clear policy, which is a break from the past where terrorism went on. You had incidents of terrorism, violence, killings, and yet India kept talking to Pakistan. But this government has adopted a different approach. And I think they have a right to do that because if that approach didn't give you any outcomes, any
Yes,
positive outcomes, then there's no harm in trying this particular approach. Whereas there are criticisms about this approach too, that if you don't do the political dialogue with your adversary, then they become desperate and they can go to any lengths
Yeah.
to hit at you. In fact, a lot of people have started citing the example of Hamas and Israel,
Yeah.
where Hamas became desperate and managed to inflict substantial damage to Israel's reputation as well as some of its people, civilians. But that's a completely different set of circumstances. One should never equate one episode or one, I would say, geopolitical incident in a different part of the world to what is the reality between India and Pakistan. So I don't think India is going to hit out at Pakistan or launch an offensive against Pakistan. The very fact that India is ignoring Pakistan and making it irrelevant, that is the biggest punishment as far as any country is concerned.
So do you think there is a one-stop solution to end this nonsense?
There is no one-stop solution. It has to be a comprehensive, all-round, various factors into it. But India's one condition has to be fulfilled: that terrorism must stop, support to the proxies must stop, support to terrorist groups must stop, and shelter should not be given to India's enemies or India's adversaries by Pakistan. That has been India's condition. If that is not fulfilled, why should India go out of its way to start talking to Pakistan? What are you going to get out of it? Some people have suggested, you restart trade ties or trade relationship between India and Pakistan. That will give you, much more softer approach to Pakistan. But I think the government has decided, and it hasn't really paid any heavy price for it. While some people say that you must continue to engage with your adversary also, India doesn't see any benefit out of it, and therefore it is adopting the approach that it has adopted over the past 7-8 years.
I see. So, sir, talking about Israel and Palestine war, so what do you think? What's your whole take on the situation?
Well, first of all, it's not Israel-Palestine.
Yeah,
it is Israel-Hamas.
Israel-Hamas, yeah.
So India has very clearly distinguished between a terrorist act and Palestine's right to have a state for itself. So if you see, very nuanced approach, nuanced stand India has taken. On the first day, the Indian government or the Prime Minister himself supported Israel and condemned the act of terrorism, brutal act of terrorism by the Hamas group. But immediately afterwards, in a couple of days, India restated its position that it continues to support a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine issue. So I think that's the best approach to take. You are not denying the Palestine people or the people of Palestine their right to have a homeland. And yet you are condemning the brutal act of terrorism and violence which was perpetrated by Hamas, which is a terrorist group as far as the world is concerned. So I think that nuanced approach is something which is we have to be appreciative about, because earlier we used to club everything together. Anybody who supported Palestine was also supported by India, and India used to be hesitant to engage with Israel openly. But I think this approach works better.
So Israel has been facing a lot of backlash in the world just because it has been targeting civilians or, let us say, children, refugee camps in the world. So where do you draw the line?
Well, I think Israel's current leader, Benjamin Netanyahu has gone overboard or has overreacted because he feels perhaps insulted by the fact that Israel's reputation has taken a knocking and that knock and his own reputation is in tatters. Political career is at stake. So he's overreacting. But the world is now advising him that, you must stop somewhere. You have to draw a line. And he must draw a line. I think India is going to also, constantly saying this, that violence is not the answer. It is not an era of war or even, counter terrorist operations beyond a point. Because it only brings misery and it brings suffering to the people, and especially innocent people, civilians, who have no say either way. I mean, they didn't approve of Hamas actions, I'm sure.
Right.
And now they don't need to be victims of Israel's overreaction, which I think there are voices within Israel which are now started saying that, we have to draw a line somewhere, we have to stop somewhere and find different ways to deal with the Hamas terrorist, distinguish between the terrorist and the civilians.
Yes, sir. So, sir, I know it's a difficult question to ask, but do you think there is any solution to radical Islamism? I asked Dr. Arangarathan the same. He said, I don't see anything.
Well, that has been a problem the world has been facing. I mean, there is no clear-cut solution. There is no clear-cut answer to it. Radicalism in Islam has become a weapon for some of its proponents. And no matter what you try, no matter what the world has been trying since, at least if you look at the inflection point of September 2001, when the World Trade Center was attacked and America was attacked. Since then, there are several versions of radical Islamism which has been rearing its head everywhere, but including India. But one of the things that distinguishes India and sort of shows India in a different light is the fact, which one should not forget, that we have 20 crore Muslim population.
Yeah.
But a very minuscule percentage of that becomes or has become radical, or has taken up arms, or has indulged in violence or sabotage, or has joined groups like ISIS,
Right,
which
sir.
is a commendable achievement for the Indian society. I'm not even going and saying that this is the achievement of the Indian government,
Yeah.
but it's the Indian society which lives in harmony. And it is possible because majority population in India are Hindus, and the Hindu way of life is very tolerant, very acceptable, very accommodative, and therefore saner Muslims, saner Muslim families, saner Muslim population realizes this. So this radicalism in India is actually not at par with radicalism in the
the
Middle
world.
East,
Yeah.
or elsewhere. Even in Europe, the radicalism amongst the Islamic population is something that the governments have started worrying about. Not that Indian government doesn't worry about it, but it takes active measures. The society itself is like a shock absorber, the Indian society, the structure, the way people are living. So I am very hopeful that this kind of radicalism which we witnessed in Gaza Strip or are witnessing elsewhere will not be witnessed in India in the years to come.
I see. So, do you see any bonhomie between Hindus and Muslims?
There is, in fact, if you take away politics of it,
Yeah.
I think Hindus and Muslims they coexist, they live together, they work together in many smaller towns. If you go to tier 2, tier 3
Yes, sir.
towns, and even in the markets, if you go, the business carries on. Well, there will be some kind of tension somewhere or the other, brought in by circumstances, brought in by the overall sentiment in the world, or even politics.
Yes.
But I think on the whole, if you ask me, there is no personal enmity people indulge in. As a group, there could be rivalries, there could be kind of resentment, and I would even say go to the extent of saying enmity amongst both sides about each other. But if you go individually and look at people, how they interact with each other, how they transact business with each other, I think we don't have such a problem.
So, what's your take on the situation of Bengal?
Well,
Under Mamata Banerjee's rule.
So she is allowed free run to, I would say, radical and extremist elements amongst the Muslims there for her own political gain. And there again, we have to distinguish that the continuous influx from Bangladesh, at least in some of the districts of Bengal, over so many decades, has resulted in enclaves and areas or constituencies which are completely dominated by people who think their political rights or their political aspirations and their political survival depends on this en masse voting to a certain party. And Mamata Banerjee has actually cashed in on that. She is only following in the footsteps of the erstwhile CPM and the left parties, which had something similar kind of approach to elections. And this is all about political power. an appeasement of small groups which vote en masse, which I've seen in Assam when I was there for so many years. That earlier in Assam, the Congress party used to say in the 70s and the 80s that as long as there are Alis, Kulis and Bengalis, the Congress party will surely come to power.
Yes.
Even if the vote percentage for that particular party which comes to power is less than 30% or even about 27-28%. Because those groups, Alis are basically people who they referred to who had migrated from the erstwhile East Pakistan, then Bangladesh. Coolies are derogatory referred to as the tea garden workers, and Bengalis are the Bengali Hindus who sought refuge in protection by the Congress party in those years. And this was said by none other than Devkant Barua, who was Congress president during emergency. He was from Assam, and he was very clear that to remain in power, the Congress party has to take help of these groups which are well organized and which vote in one way. But all that has changed. It is no longer true. It is no longer vote that comes to you automatically to any political party. You have to work hard at it. People have started discriminating. Therefore, I would think something similar. Mamata Banerjee might be getting that vote today, but it will not last too long.
So, do you think the President of India should have dismissed the government?
No, I don't think so. Because of the violence?
Because of the sheer Gunda Raj, if I'm not wrong.
Well, see, that one's Gundagardi can be other man's power.
Yes.
It can be said about some other governments in India.
Right.
So, and there is no end to it then, because you've done it once to Mamata Banerjee. Tomorrow, if the opposition parties come to power, they can do it to any BJP government, for instance.
Right.
It's not the right way. Earlier, yes, there used to be rampant misuse of Article 356.
Yeah.
And governments used to be dismissed at whims and fancies of the central government. But today, that is not possible. You've seen this in Bihar because the Supreme Court or the courts now intervene very quickly. And also the atmosphere has become completely different. It's no longer that monopoly of power that one party has.
Right.
And even if you have brute majority, it's difficult to implement such one-sided, blatant approach to your political rivals.
Right.
And therefore, I don't think, and it would have been counterproductive. Frankly, if you had dismissed Mamata Banerjee's government for the violence that it witnessed, or it sort of ignored during the panchayat elections or otherwise, I would think that it would have made her a martyr. A political martyr, and she would have cashed in on it. So therefore, sometimes those extreme steps are not advisable.
I see. So why do you think such people can become political martyrs? Why do we see terrorists to become martyrs?
Because that's the way human psychology is. That if you apply force to, or if you sort of gang up against a particular group or an individual, then despite all their past sins or their sins of commission and omission, people start sympathizing with them. It's human psychology. And therefore, you cannot ignore that. You have to draw a fine balance between the two.
So what about the Indian states? Do you think, sir, the Indian states are, let's just say, increasingly getting hostile? Or let's just, if the hostile word is too strong, let's just say there are immediate disagreements between the state governments. Mm-hmm. Let's just say if there is BJP government, let's just say in any state, and if there is a Congress government in southern states, their political views, their state agencies or let's just say agendas are completely different. So do you think we can have, let's just say, state unionship? Like, what do you think?
No, so are you talking about the differences or the rivalry?
For example, when the Kashmir Files film was released, other states went to ban, and some states said this will be tax-free. So what do you think, sir? Like, this is just one example. I'm not talking solely about this issue.
No, I know. I understand what you're driving at.
Yeah.
See, basically, political ideologies or political stands that political parties take on a particular issue or issues depends on who they are competing with and what are they competing for.
Right.
So, if the Congress party was a dominant political force, say between 1947 and 1967 to begin with, and from 67 to 87, again, also from 1970 to 87, the ideology preached by the Congress party, which was a mix of secularism, which was described by the BJP as pseudo-secularism,
Yeah.
and which was also based on a certain sense of patronage, a kind of framework that they had evolved where you co-opted many of the elements of the governance structure. The Congress party's ideology was dominant. And there was no contest between what is now BJP's ideology or was then BJP's ideology and Congress, because Congress was too powerful.
Right.
Or the Congress ideology was too powerful. It is only post in 1989 when India started witnessing coalition governments. And India has had coalition governments between 1989 and 2014, where the central government's powers were waning and the states and the regional forces were gaining ground. Instead of having one strong dominant party at the center, you started having a coalition of interests where you had to compromise, you had to sort of give and take to survive in the political race to be
Right,
at the
sir.
center. The friction between political parties started getting accentuated.
Right.
That's what happened. Now, from 2014 onwards, BJP has become the dominant force, politically and otherwise, very dominant force because of Prime Minister Modi's popularity and the way the BJP functions, the way it organizes its party, the way it mobilizes voters. It's become the strongest force or the most dominant political force. Now, all other parties fear BJP's dominance because BJP tends to decimate them or make them irrelevant. So, smaller parties like Shiv Sena, Akali Dal,
Yeah.
MGP in Goa, it used to be Maharashtra Gawadi Gomantak Party, all of those parties, just to give 3 examples, they have been swallowed up in a way by the BJP because they undermined them, they made them irrelevant and they became the dominant force. So today it is BJP versus rest.
Right.
And therefore, wherever you have a non-BJP government, they, for their own political survival and for their own political legitimacy, they have to oppose whatever BJP does, or anybody who professes to be a BJP supporter or a supporter of the BJP ideology, they will oppose it, even for the sake of opposition. And therefore, what you are witnessing now, this friction between different states and the center, different states ganging up together, the emergence of the India alliance,
Yeah.
where you have desperate political parties coming together for sheer survival.
Yeah.
And therefore, this is a legitimate, natural progression of political activity in a democracy like India.
So, since you mentioned India Alliance, if you want to shed more light on it, what's your take on this whole coalition?
It's again too early to say what they will do, because already there are voices of dissonance, voices of differences, and they'll have to have a common program, what they used to be called common minimum program. Then they have to have seat adjustments. They have to have so many of those
Right.
arrangements for making a sense of or presenting an alternative to the people, alternative to the current BJP dispensation or the
Right, sir.
current thing. So we'll have to wait whether these 4 assembly elections will bring in some more churn, whether they will gain more traction, whether they will shed their differences and then come together to challenge BJP together. We'll have to wait and watch. It's too early to comment on India Alliance. It's a to my mind, it is like a fight for survival.
Right.
For many of these political parties who are part of India Alliance, and they have right to do that because that's what they are in the business of politics for.
Right, sir.
Right? So they can aspire for power. They must aspire for power, and that's democracy all about.
So, what do you think, sir? Being a national security expert, so where do you think the government is lacking in every aspect?
Where is it lacking?
Yes, sir. Or maybe where the government should focus more.
Well, see, the challenges are unending. In a country like India,
Yeah.
you have poverty, you have lack of development in many places, the lack of uniformity in development and progress amongst different states,
Yes, sir.
different parts of the country. That's a given challenge. Today, the government lacks one, I should say, coherent policy for international relations, because the global arena, or the globe is in a flux. So you have to adapt as you go along. You have to think on your feet. And India, in a way, that is done very well by being the voice of reason, leading the global South, looking at keeping good relations with Russia intact for over the years, whatever the relations have been, and yet gaining more and more benefits from the West, or especially the United States. So it is doing all that. Now, as far as lack of government action is concerned, there is no particular thing I can point out that this is where they have failed.
Okay.
Again, their degree of success
Yeah.
is varying. So price rise continues to be a challenge. Inflation continues to be a challenge.
Yeah.
But the defenders of the government will have various factors to point out why inflation is so high.
Yeah.
So that's one challenge. Lack of the old style employment opportunities for the youth is another. But again, when we say that, we have to take into consideration the fact that the job market has changed. It's no longer the old way of getting a job in a government or in a corporate or any company and continuing in that job for the next 30 years. Today, young people are becoming entrepreneurs at a very early age. They are hopping from one job to the other. They are adding more skills to their portfolio, all that. So the definition of the old employment rate or a rate of unemployment amongst the youth can again vary because of the changed circumstances. But again, government can do a little more to give quality jobs to youngsters, because more and more people are acquiring degrees, they're acquiring skills. But I think this is a growth without commensurate growth in generation of jobs, economic growth I'm talking about, which is again a challenge to the government. But what it could do better, maybe it can do better in this. I'm not an economic expert, but that's my observation.
I see.
And finally, the challenge that China poses to India must be taken into consideration, because China has become much more assertive, not just against India, but all its neighbors. Even it's taking on the challenge of the United States. So India must be on its guard dealing with China, not just on the military front, but also in various other aspects like business, economy, international arena, all that. So I think there are ways of improve. I mean, there are areas where the government can improve, but I can't pinpoint utter failure of the government.
Okay. So, talking about China, so China has continuously stated in the whole world that India's map excludes Arunachal Pradesh, right, and some parts of Jammu and Kashmir. So, why don't we adopt the same ideology? Because whatever they do, it is full of shit. But in reality, China has occupied, let's just say, Tibet. It has occupied, let's just say, the place where Muslims live.
Xinjiang.
Xinjiang. And also, let's just say, East
Turkmenistan.
East Turkmenistan. So in fact, China's real size is actually 1/3 of India. And many people don't know this thing.
No, so I think that is something that one can debate in a separate
but this is the reality, sir. Like, I don't think so. This is a point of debate, because this is what has actually happened. They have acquired territories, not by a peaceful.
No, that you cannot debate. I mean, there's no point of debate in that. But today, the reality is that these are all territories ruled and governed by China.
Yeah.
So let's not get into what they have done, how they have done it.
Yeah.
See, we can also talk about having ceded ground to Pakistan. I mean, Pakistan was created out of undivided India, right?
Yeah.
So India has a right to be upset. India has a right to be legitimately aspiring to take back Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Right,
All
sir.
that can happen. So boundaries change over the years. Geographical boundaries can change. The governance structure or who rules over a particular territory can change over centuries.
Yeah.
So I'm not getting into that aspect. Whatever we see as China, China is a big country. Let's accept that because you cannot change it.
Yeah.
India accepted the fact that Tibet is part of China long ago.
That is the whole problem.
No. I mean, now you can't undo that, right?
Yeah.
So there's no point crying over the past decisions, whether they were right or wrong. That's a matter of debate depending on where you sit and where you stand.
Okay.
But what India has to prevent and what India has to guard against is nibbling away at India's territory by China in various places like Arunachal Pradesh or in Aksai Chin, which legitimately is India's part.
Yeah.
But China has occupied it from 1960s after the 62 war. We haven't been able to do anything about it. Something similar that they're claiming Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet, but there are historical reasons for it. India has now established its sovereignty, its control over Tawang. But I'm not sure if you're aware that till 1951, Tawang's status was not determined. It was Major Bob Cutting who took an expedition to Tawang in 1951 and planted a flag, Indian flag on Tawang. Otherwise, it used to be part of what used to be called Tibet, and the monastery there used to be governed or ruled by Potala Palace, by the Dalai Lama or his people that time. So China therefore calls it South Tibet. But India has established sovereignty, its own control over Tawang. So why should India bother about what China says?
Okay.
We can also say that Tibet is a separate country, but that doesn't make a difference. Yeah. I think we should be practical. We should be pragmatic. We should give more attention to progress and development and infrastructure building in these areas. Automatically, people will remain with India.
So, do you think our Indian army or Indian military is at par with China?
No, it's not at par with China at all, whether in quantity or whether in technology. But it doesn't mean that India is a pushover.
Yeah.
For years together, we neglected infrastructure development in the border areas along the China border. For years, we concentrated too much on Pakistan. We had majority, or I would say a brute majority, looking at Pakistan and trying to either defend territory being occupied by Pakistan or have an offensive option against Pakistan. But we neglected our preparation and our modernization along the Himalayan frontier and the border with China.
Right.
So let's accept this fact that we are weaker than China. We are weaker militarily, economically, even internationally. But we are not a pushover. And that is what makes China worried. About the only country that worries China really, apart from the United States, is India in Asia.
So, do you think who is a bigger threat, India or China or Pakistan?
Well, China, definitely. Pakistan is a subset of the China challenge.
Okay. I see. So, do you think these two countries will come together to bite India in the back?
They might. That possibility always exists. That is why we keep talking about the two-front war.
Yeah.
But there are practical difficulties in doing all that. And Pakistan has its own problems now internally and on its western border. China also doesn't want to prop up Pakistan unnecessarily because it gives it the bad name.
Right.
If China wants to be taken seriously as a major global player or major power, then it cannot adopt the tactics or the methods adopted by say Pakistan or North Korea. But in reality, today who are China's friends? North Korea, Pakistan, and maybe Russia to an extent
only
because of compulsion.
Out of compulsion.
Out of compulsion because of its current status.
Yeah.
That way. The rest are all hedged against China. They're all ranged against China. And therefore, it is not in an easy position to be a Chinese or to be China, really,
I see.
in this world.
do you think COVID was a bioweapon in your own personal opinion?
Again, I don't know. I have no definite answer, but I
Okay.
certainly don't put it beyond China to use that if that
Yeah.
possibility exists,
Yeah.
or having developed that. But no matter what happened, the fact is that COVID has shaken up the world,
Yeah.
has created a churn in the international
Right.
politics and international relations. And I don't put it beyond China to having developed that. But
I
if
see.
China is developing it, then so are other nations going to look at it.
Sir, assuming that China
Developed it.
unleashed COVID
Okay.
as a bioweapon, so what do you think will be the far-reaching consequences for the world by grossly neglecting China's crime?
See, if you look at what has happened post-COVID, today even China is facing a downturn in its economy. It is slowing down. China's economy let us assume for a moment that China has unleashed that weapon
Yeah.
and has created chaos the world over. Economies have collapsed, countries have become bankrupt, all that has happened. Now, has it benefited China? Let's ask that question.
Yeah.
China's economy was always export-led and export-dependent.
Right.
That means whatever goods they produced used to be exported to big markets in Europe and the Americas. Okay. Because they had purchasing power, they had legitimate
Right.
wealth, or they had legitimate and illegitimate wealth to buy all that. And therefore, China was happy to keep supplying the world. They became a factory of the world. Right? But because the economies in the Europe and elsewhere collapsed, even in Asia, economies took a hit. People went into negative growth. China's own supply lines and own export growth or export orientation suffered.
Yeah.
And that is now they are facing the consequences in their domestic issues or in their domestic economy, because they do not have that kind of consumption amongst their own citizens, or they do not have that kind of economic dependence or economic factors that can be relied upon by the domestic audience or the domestic population. And therefore, China is also suffering. It hasn't had the deceleration in its economic growth like it is having now in the last 40 years. So eventually, who is suffering? With the rest of the world, even China is suffering. So therefore, I'm saying they may be reviewing this whole issue if they have used this as a bioweapon or a weapon of mass destruction. I think it is also affecting China, not just other countries.
So, what do you think about NATO similarly? Do you think NATO as a peaceful alliance, or has it lately started to become a more intimidating, fear-mongering organization in the world?
Well, NATO was formed for a particular reason. Post the initiation of the Cold War in the post World War II era, if you look back at history. And the contest between the erstwhile USSR or the Soviet Union and the West, led by the US, has never gone away. And Europe was always the playground for that. NATO was part of that particular arsenal which the West had against Russia. And therefore, NATO was important. But today, I am asking this question: has NATO been able to prevent Russia from acting against Ukraine?
Yeah.
Or has NATO been able to halt Russia's advances in the Ukraine war, or has to defeat Russia, let's say, to go to the other extreme? Has NATO been able to do that? No.
It has actually paved as an acceleration, to be honest.
Exactly. So because NATO was acting the way it was acting, Russia was forced to, at least Russia took the pretense or took that as an excuse to launch an operation against Ukraine, which was about to become a NATO power or at least part of the European Union. But more than European Union, it was about being part of NATO, which Russia didn't want NATO's troops to be on its doorstep, right? And therefore, we are seeing what we are seeing in Russia-Ukraine war. So I don't think NATO is such a big force, or NATO is a force that will change the course of history.
So
I don't think
do you
so.
think it should be dissolved, NATO?
No, that is up to the European governments. But I mean, it hasn't served the purpose. It doesn't have the wherewithal to turn the tide of a war as we have now witnessed. So I don't know what
So
NATO
talking
is
about
all
the
about.
Russia-Ukraine war, do you think Zelensky has committed, let's just say, idiocy on his part in waging war with Russia?
Of course, now it's coming to the fore that the West may have sort of run out of its energy
Yeah, they are
in
already
terms
running
of
out of their
running
energy.
out of their energy and running out of their resolve to support Ukraine too long. I think
Yeah,
there are more and more voices, more
against it.
vocal demands for a ceasefire with Russia, because it is hollowing out not just Ukraine
Yeah,
but other countries in Europe also.
I think this is what similarly Hamas did. They took on Israel and they bit more than they can chew. Right.
Absolutely.
This is what has happened. Why should India trade with China? Because we are still trading with China. We may not talk with Pakistan, that they saying that they kill us, that they kill our soldiers, whatever it may be. But why are we still trading with China? That also in huge numbers.
See, over the years, since the late 90s, after China joined WTO, Indian government made a mistake. Governments
Yeah.
made a mistake of opening up the entire market of India in various sectors to Chinese goods, Chinese raw material, Chinese suppliers, and it is not easy to reverse that flow or that dependency on Chinese raw material. One, because of its competitive prices, and two, because China in some cases is the only supplier for
Right.
Indian manufacturing or Indian different sectors of India's economy. Even if the decision was taken in 2020 to, let's say, uh,
Boycott trade
not
relations.
boycott, really you can't. In today's world, you cannot boycott.
Okay.
You reduce your dependency or
Yeah.
reduce your import from China. It is not easy because the competitive prices will not come here. The industries will collapse if they go to other sources.
I see.
And therefore, it's always a very difficult choice for governments to ban some of the goods or
Yeah,
raw
I get your
material
point,
coming
sir.
from China and not allow Indian companies to compete. For instance, a lot of actions are being taken. You have that in the telecom sector, for instance, India has cleverly banned Chinese equipment manufacturer or Chinese telecom giant Huawei
Yeah.
by simply saying material or goods or services coming from countries which have land borders with India cannot compete in these critical sectors, for instance. We haven't said that we have banned equipment from China. But you have, cleverly said that we will not, because you're not going to get telecom equipment from Pakistan or Bangladesh or Nepal or Bhutan or Myanmar.
Right, sir.
Only country which can give you quality equipment or skills or technology is China. You have cleverly banned that. So the process has started. It will take at least 5 to 6 more years to lessen the dependency, and therefore this whole policy of Atmanirbharta,
Yeah.
policy of self-reliance, doing more and more. But economies in the world over are so intertwined that you cannot completely cut off ties with even your adversaries.
I see. That it is so complicated,
Very
right?
complicated.
Yes, sir. So, sir, coming to another country, which is Afghanistan.
Mhm.
So, do you think that maybe the Indian government should single-handedly play a role in establishing peace in the country, or do you think the collective world governments should come together?
I think
Because Afghanistan has been left to dogs, to be honest. Just because they don't have oil, they have been left to dogs.
no, I mean, okay, that you can say that everybody is ignoring Afghanistan at the moment,
Yeah.
but Afghanistan cannot be kept down for too long. I mean, it always plays a part in international relations,
Yeah.
and big powers always have interest in Afghanistan. So, be it the US, China, Russia, and now India. So I think there are efforts to build bridges with whoever is ruling the country there. The Taliban is now becoming a legitimate political force.
Yeah.
And India is doing its bit in trying to help Afghanistan in many ways. But again, the bitter experience of the past tells you that it's not going to be an easy task to rebuild Afghanistan, to allow people to function normally as citizens of Afghanistan, because there's a lot of historical baggage against the Taliban in various countries. But I think India has again done a very subtle taken a subtle approach to dealing with the Taliban. It hasn't recognized the Taliban,
Yeah.
but it still continues, or the Taliban government, but it continues to help the people of Afghanistan
Yeah.
in various ways. I think that's the way to go.
I see. So, wrapping this up, do you see any potential future emerging risks or threats to India or to the world?
Well,
Being an expert.
I will not pretend to know all the answers
I
for the
see.
world thing, but about what are the threats to India?
Yeah.
Climate change is one. I think rising temperatures, losing water sources, or running out of water is one of the concerns. The other is lack of quality education
Right, sir.
amongst quality education being imparted to youth. We have a number of education institutes. We are manufacturing or producing lakhs and lakhs of graduates, but in my view, they are not employable.
Right, sir.
Nearly 70-80% of them are not employable. So we are not imparting employability skills to the people, to the youth, which is supposed to be our dividend. But that dividend can turn into your legitimate albatross around your neck, if you don't give enough attention to quality education, skilling,
Yeah.
and all that. And finally, I think one of the major issues in India would be the imbalance of development, progress, and wealth creation between and also the political power between the north and the south.
I see.
If you divide them by simple geographical fact of south of Vindhyas and north of Vindhyas, I think there is going to be a lot of resentment on both sides of the divide of the Vindhyas on how populations on both sides of the divide are either getting educated or getting wealthy, and the political power that they wield. Disproportionate on one side,
Yeah.
less political power, which is likely to be there in the south, but more prosperous south and the west against
Right, sir.
more populous North India. That divide should not become accentuated. It should not become bigger than it is right now. That is my worry.
So, one last message for nation building. That's it.
Well, nation should be above your own personal ambitions.
Yeah.
If you love your country, and if you think India has its own place in the world, in the global affairs, then I think if there is a conflict between personal ambition and or personal gain or personal I would say progress and nation's progress, I think the nation should always come first. I think that's my message to the youth.
Thank you so much, sir. It was truly amazing podcast. Thank you so much, sir. I've seeked so much knowledge. I'm incredibly humble for this, sir.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.